So it's been a tough week here at Torch and in the Wolby family. As I mentioned 2 weeks ago, my niece Meira had a baby, very, very premature, and was very, very serious and very touch and go. And unfortunately, the baby passed away. So it's a terrible tragedy. And my brother and my sister-in-law are in Israel trying to comfort the young couple, Meira and Shimon, and we wish them to hopefully get back their strength. It's absolutely devastating, and we're all thinking about them and praying for them and wishing that they are comforted amongst all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And we hope to hear only good news from them and from the rest of the family and the general Torch community. It's very sad and very tragic, and it's just there's no words. There's no words, and we of course don't know what the Almighty's plan is, but it's absolutely devastating for our family and for Meira and the whole extended family. And we hope that they experience no more pain and no more suffering, and experience joy. And we're thinking about them, and we love them, and we hope to hear only good things from them going forward. It's Parsha podcast time, and I will tell you that my wife Chaya is in Chicago this week. She brought her students to Chicago, and I said, sure, I'll watch the kids. I'll get them dressed and get them to school and make the lunches and drop them and pick them up and take care of everything and make dinner. No problem. I'm sure the Parsha podcast won't suffer. I'm positive. But in all seriousness, despite the fact that they have lots of extra familial responsibilities, I'm not complaining for a single second, because it is a gift and a privilege and an honor to be able to take care of one's family. And I was thinking that we know that one of the greatest mitzvahs that we can do is to help others, is to feed others, is to take care of others. And who's to say that if the people you're feeding and tending to are your own children, it's any less important, any less valuable? I don't think that's true. You're feeding the Almighty's children, and you have opportunity to dress them and take them to school and drive them to the friends. What a privilege. And there's no way that the Parsha podcast will suffer. The Almighty has His ways. He could save you even with less time. And let me know what you think. My email address is rabbiwolby@gmail.com. I always cherish your feedback and your correspondence. This week we wrap up the book of Leviticus, the book of Vayikra. We have yet another double Parsha, Behar and Bechukosai. Behar starts off with laws of shemitah. God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, Behar Sinai, on Mount Sinai, saying, and the first comment in Rashi, it's one of the most famous and oft discussed comments in Rashi in the Torah. Rashi says the question, what is the connection between shemitah and Mount Sinai? The nation has been at Mount Sinai for a long time. All the laws of Leviticus were taught at Sinai. Why specifically when it comes to shemitah, when it comes to allowing the land to lay fallow on year 7, why over here explicitly are we told that this was said at Sinai? So Rashi answers that yes, it's true that all the mitzvahs were said at Sinai, but there's something we need to learn from shemitah and apply that more universally to all the mitzvahs, just as with shemitah, with the law of leaving the land fallow on year 7. The general principles and the details and all the specifics were said at Sinai, so too all the mitzvahs, even the ones that were not told explicitly were said at Sinai. Everything was conveyed at Sinai. Klaleha pratea v'dikdukea, the general principles, the specifics, and the minute details were all said at Sinai. Rashi explains, many mitzvahs were repeated later on, even after the nation departed from Sinai. Shemitah was said only at Sinai, and that is to reveal that really all the mitzvahs were originally conveyed to Moshe at Sinai. And then, of course, the verses instruct us with the laws of Shemitah. When you arrive in the land, you settle the land has to have a Shabbos. We have 6 days of the week, 1 day of Shabbos. 6 years the land works, and on the 7th year, it's a Shabbos for your land. You don't do any work. You don't prune your vineyard. You don't gather in your crops. It's a Shabbos. It's a day of rest. It's a year of rest for your fields. And not only for you, for your animals, for your servants, for your maidservants, and so on. That's the law of shemitah. And then it proceeds to tell us that there's like a double shemitah that happens once every 50 years. There is the Yovel. Every 50 years, which is 7 cycles of 7 shemitahs, because every 7th year is a shemitah. So year 7, year 14, year 21, and so on. Shemitah, year 49 is shemitah. It's the 7th shemitah in the cycle. Year 50 is another shemitah. This is called Yovel. And you gotta take the shofar and make a blast, the shofar blast on Yom Kippur. And you have to release all the servants and all the lands, the ancestral lands that were sold, returned to the original owners. This is Yovel, a back-to-back Shemitah year. All the laws of Shemitah apply. In addition, there are other laws. The 50th year is the 2nd year of a double Shemitah, and it's the end of a cycle of 50, 7 cycles of 7 plus 1. And the verse tells us that if you observe the laws, if you guard the statutes, then you will live securely upon the land, and the land will produce fruits, and you'll eat to satiation, and you will dwell upon it in security. And Rashi tells us that this is explicitly linking the continuity of the Jewish people in the land of Israel to their observance of Shemitah. If you observe the laws of Shemitah, then you will have continuity, you will be secure in the land, but God forbid, if you repudiate the laws of Shemitah, then you will be exiled. And the Talmud makes a whole calculation. How many years were they not fulfilling the laws of Shemitah? And that's the precise number of years that the nation was exiled. The Shemitah is about accepting the dominion of God. He is the boss. If we refuse to accept that, we are booted from his land. And the progression of the Parsha, the first Parsha, continues to describe how the lack of Shemitah observance causes exile, and then it goes from sin, from punishment to punishment, a long litany of punishments that happen to a person who refuses to relinquish ownership of the land, refuses to allow access to all, or does business with Shemitah produce. A series of terrible things will befall them. That's Parsha's Behar, and Bechukosai is primarily the admonition of Leviticus. In the Torah, there are 2 major admonitions where the nation is admonished. They are told the blessings of mitzvos, the blessings that they will receive if they are meritorious and righteous and fulfill the mitzvos, and conversely, the admonishment and the punishment that they will be subject to in the event that they repudiate the mitzvos. The parsha begins, Im Bechukosai telechu, if you shall walk with my statutes, and you guard my mitzvos, and you perform them. And again, we have another iconic Rashi. These 2 might be the most famous, two of the most famous Rashis in the whole Torah. Rashi says, what does it mean, Bechukosai? In my statutes you shall walk. Statutes typically means the laws, right? It's the mitzvos. But the verse proceeds and says, you guard the mitzvos. And you do the mitzvos. So if the end of the verse addresses mitzvos, it must be that the beginning of the verse is addressing something else. So what is the beginning of the verse? Bechukosai, in my statutes you shall walk. That's a reference to toiling in Torah, amelim baTorah. If you do that, the verse continues, you'll have blessing, you'll have bountiful crops and fruits and rain in the right time and security and satiation and peace in the land. You won't have any enemies. There won't be any wild animals roaming the land. There won't be war. If you do have enemies, you will defeat them and crush them entirely. You'll be fruitful. You will multiply. God will be close to you. He will maintain his covenant with you. You'll have so much abundance, you'll eat the old produce from last year. God will dwell amongst you. He won't reject you. Things will be swell. But if you reject God and you reject his Torah and mitzvos, and then there's a whole series of lists of harsh and brutal maledictions, dozens of spine-chilling verses that describe curses that have that will befall and have befallen to our people. And the custom, when this is read in shul, is that the person who's reading from the Torah reads it in an undertone and very fast, because it's not something that people like to dwell upon. It's very depressing, especially in light of the fact that all of the curses that are described in the verses have actually happened to us. So we have two parshas, a double parsha, and we're going to try to link some ideas together from each parsha. We will more specifically link the first Rashi comment in Parshas Behar with the first Rashi comment in Parshas Bechukosai. So let's begin. Bechukosai. If you walk in my statutes, God says. Well, what does that mean? It can't refer to the performance of mitzvos, because the verse continues, and you guard my mitzvos and do the mitzvos. So that's already addressed. It would be redundant to say it twice. So what does it mean? Bechukosai telechu, to go in God's statutes. It means to toil in Torah. There's something else here besides for observance of mitzvos. It's to toil in Torah. And toil is a funny word. It means to work really hard. To sweat over Torah. Now, if you ever had the great privilege of spending some time in the yeshiva, they love this comment in Rashi. Because what are the yeshiva students all doing all day and night? They're toiling in Torah. They're studying Torah with intensity, with even a bit of aggression. It's an experience that you cannot see anywhere else in the world. To walk into a yeshiva, an elite yeshiva, even better, and to see the intensity of study, it's unmatched by anything else in the world. I remember reading an essay by Mortimer Zuckerman, I think it is. Zuckerberg. One guy's the Facebook guy. The other guy's like the real estate and media magnate. And he was saying, I had the privilege of walking into yeshiva, and the intellectual rigor and the intensity of the debate is unmatched by anything I've seen. And I've been to Harvard Law School. I was a student at Harvard Law School. That's what he said. It's nothing. Harvard Law, the best and the brightest, they don't hold a candle to the intensity and to the rigor of the yeshiva. What's happening in the yeshiva? Toiling in Torah. And here we see that what is the trigger of all the blessings? Bechukosai telechu, toiling in Torah. All good things will happen. Prosperity, security, God will be in our midst. All the blessings are brought about, are precipitated, are effectuated by amelus b'Torah, toiling in Torah. But if we reject God, we repudiate Him, we don't walk in God's statutes. Ve'im lo tishmeu li, if you don't listen to God, and you don't do the mitzvos. And Rashi, in verse 14 there explains, what does it mean if you don't listen to me? It can't be referring to not doing the mitzvos, because that it says explicitly in the verse. If you don't listen to me and you don't do the mitzvos. So what does it mean if you don't listen to me? It can't be referring to not doing the mitzvos, because that's the end of the verse. What does it mean if you don't listen to me? If you are not toiling in Torah. So the blessing is triggered by toil in Torah. The curses, God forbid, are brought about by lack of toil in Torah. Both the blessings and the curses hinge on this. The amazing blessings that we are all desirous of, the terrifying curses that frighten us. It all depends, Rashi tells us, on this quality to toil in Torah. Now, what that means is a bit of a mystery. We all understand we have to study the Almighty's Torah. It's the gift that He harbored in His treasure houses for 974 generations before the world was created. It's God's most cherished possession, so to speak. It's what He used to create the world. He gave it to us. What a privilege. What an honor. Of course, we should study the Torah intensely. But what's meant by toiling? Why is there such a focus on the effort on the sweat that we have to invest. And in truth, you would think God, after all, he's the one who gives us the Torah. So don't you imagine that he would be the best teacher that there is? And shouldn't we just immediately understand it? He would explain it better than anyone else could explain it. Today they have the AI, the schools that have just AI. And the kids are just performing best in class, best in the state. They're winning all the prizes because the AI is just better at teaching than the teacher that you get, typically. God Almighty is our teacher. Shouldn't we have it spoon-fed to us in such a way that we'll just understand it right away and it'll click instantly and we'll never forget it? And we shouldn't need to work so hard. Why must we work so hard to understand the Almighty's Torah? Why is this such an emphasis? The first Rashi in Parsha's Bechukosai. The first Rashi in Parsha's Behar is focusing on the connection between the laws of shemitah and Mount Sinai. God spoke to Moshe, Behar Sinai, on Mount Sinai, saying. And Rashi says, wait a minute, what is the connection between shemitah and Mount Sinai? All the mitzvahs were set at Sinai. Why is it specifically pointing out the location of the conveyance of this mitzvah in particular? So Rashi explains, shemitah, the general principles, the details, all the specifics were told at Sinai, and that is applicable across the board. All the mitzvahs were told entirely at Sinai. Now this, if you read it simply, it's revealing to us that shemitah, it's being used to teach us about mitzvos in general. All mitzvos were all told at Sinai. The laws and the general laws and the specifics and the details, from the most general principle to the most granular details, were all set at Sinai. And who's teaching us that? Shemitah. Maybe you could have used some other mitzvah to convey this idea. God tells Moshe on Mount Sinai, keep the Shabbos. God tells Moshe on Mount Sinai, wear tefillin, have a mezuzah, laws of kosher, laws of red heifer, whatever it is. Any mitzvah could have stood in as the representative of all mitzvahs. But no, shemitah. Shemitah is the one. Now, when you examine this issue a little bit more deeply, you discover that there are all sorts of other connections between Sinai and shemitah. Shemitah is every seventh year. 6 years you work, you plant, you prune, you plow, and so on. You reap, you harvest. The seventh year shemitah. Well, then year 8, year 9, year 10, 11, 12, 13, again, 6 more years, the seventh year shemitah. After 7 cycles of 7, you have 49 years, 7 shemitahs, and then you have the oval. Well, what happened at Sinai? We have the same format. 49 days after the Exodus, you have the one day of Sinai. The 50th day is the Sinai revelation. And we have a mitzvah. We spoke about it last week. We count the Omer. We relive the experience of preparing for Sinai, where you count 6 days, and then there's a 7th day. You count days and weeks. 7 weeks of 7 days, 49 days, and then day 50 is Sinai. So the format of shemitah and Yovel, and Sinai is the same. And there are more connections. There was a very famous statement made at Sinai. God offered the nation the Torah. And they said, yes, we accept. And there was a very iconic statement, a motto, if you will, that the nation employed. They said, we accept, but specifically, na'aseh v'nishma, we will do it and we will listen. And that seems to be the opposite. Normally you would say, okay, we'll listen, we'll understand, and then we'll do it. But they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. Now this statement by the nation, it's a very important statement, our sages tell us. When the nation said, Na'aseh v'nishma, angels came. And every angel was carrying 2 crowns. And every angel affixed those 2 crowns on the heads of every Jew, one for Na'aseh and one for Nishma. One for we will do and one for we will listen. And then, of course, the nation sinned, and then they lost it, and Moshe got it. Moshe got all 1.2 million crowns. But in the future, the nation will receive them again. This is all told to us in the Talmud, the book of Shabbos, page 88a. Continues the Talmud. When the nation said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen, a prophetic voice announced, who revealed this secret to my children? There's a secret here. Shemalache hashares mishtamshim bo, that the ministering angels use. This motto, we kind of stole it. We appropriated it from the angels. Who says Na'aseh v'nishma? We said it, but the prophecy said, well, how did you know to say it? This is what angels say. This is not what humans say. And the Talmud cites a verse. Now listen to this verse. Psalms 103, verse 20. The verse says, Baruch Hu Hashem, bless Hashem, malachav, his angels. Gibore koach, those of great strength. Osei devaro, who do his word. Lishma bekol devaro, who listen to his voice. So it says first to do and then to listen. The angels, they're the ones who do before they listen, as evident in the verse in Psalms 103:20. And somehow the nation knew to say Na'aseh v'nishma to precede the we will listen with the we will do. So the Talmud tells us that Sinai, the acceptance of Torah at Sinai, was an angelic acceptance, as evident in the verse in Psalms 103. And then we find a midrash. And the midrash is talking about a verse in Psalms, chapter 103, verse 20, the exact same verse. Baruch Hu Hashem, bless Hashem, his angels, those who are mighty, who are strong, who do his will, who hearken to his voice. Says the midrash, who is this referring to? Who are these angels that are being referred to in this verse? And the midrash explains, Bishomrei Shvius HaKasav Medaber. This is referring to those people who observe the shemitah. To observe the shemitah is to fulfill the same verse that the Talmud tells us was fulfilled at Sinai when we said Na'aseh v'nishma, is fulfilled by everyone who fulfills the laws of shemitah. Continues the midrash. People could do a mitzvah for a day, for a week, for a month. This person, someone who observes the shemitah, he sees his field is empty, is desolate, is barren. His orchard is empty. And he knows he's still got to pay the property tax bill. And he's silent, and he just accepts the will of God. Is there any greater, mightier person than this person? To have the strength, the wherewithal, to be so committed, so devoted to the word of God, to fulfill the laws of shemitah, you have to be like an angel. And thus, says the midrash, the verse in Psalms 103:20 is referring to someone who keeps shemitah. So again, we see another connection. Sinai, to say Na'aseh v'nishma, that's an adage of angels. And shemitah, that is strength of angels, and both the Midrash and the Talmud cite the exact same verse. Shemitah and Sinai are connected. Now, most of us probably figure out what the connection is. It's really what the Midrash is saying. If someone gives you an offer, you want to read the fine print. You want to do your due diligence. You want to make sure that this is a transaction that you will not regret. To say Na'aseh v'nishma, it's to rely on God completely. And to not do any due diligence. And to not do work for a whole year, that too requires angelic reliance on God. When Moshe ascended to heaven, the angels were very bothered, really baffled, by the idea that he is going to take the Torah from heaven and give it to humanity. And they said, this is flesh and blood. This is a Yulud Isha, someone born to a woman. Ma enosh tisistrena. Why does humanity even matter? Why does it even register? You give the Torah to them? Torah should be the domain of angels. And the truth is that the answer to their observation is that they're right. Torah really only is for the angels. But when the nation said, we will do and we will listen, they're saying, we could be like angels. We could have supernatural, otherworldly reliance on God. At the time, the nation is eating manna. What is manna? So manna is the most convenient food in the world. It's like everything in a pill form, it's great. But you're in a desert, and you have no plan how you're going to feed your family, and you have to be calm and worry-free because you know that tomorrow they might be going to parachute magical food to your door. Oh, and the water, we're going to drink it from a rock. Moshe will hit the rock, talk to the rock, whatever it is, and it will emit water. Enough water for a nation of millions. To be calm under those circumstances, you have to be like an angel. The Torah was only given to those who ate manna, the Talmud tells us. Lo nitna Torah ella la'ochlei haman. You have to be like an angel. You have to be eating the bread of angel, the lechem abirim, which is the name of manna, to be worthy of Torah. So we're seeing lots of connections here with shemitah and Sinai. But let's talk about the double shemitah, the Yovel. What does the word Yovel mean? So Rashi tells us, Yovel, it's called Yovel. Why is it called Yovel? Because on the Yom Kippur of Yovel, you blow a shofar. And a ram's horn is called a Yovel. And therefore, because of this shofar blast that's part of the Yovel experience, even though it seems kind of tangential, that's why the whole year is called Yovel. Yovel is like the shofar blast on Yom Kippur, on Yovel. Why is that the name? But listen to this. Where does the word Yovel first appear in the Torah? That's right, at Sinai. In chapter 19, the verse says the nation is prepared for Sinai. And again and again and again, they are warned, don't get too close to the mountain. Don't touch it. Don't tread there. Not you, not animals. If you go there, you will die. The animals that go there will die. They will not live. When can you ascend the mountain? Chapter 19, verse 13. Bimshoch hayovel. When the blast of the ram's horn is sounded, the Sinai revelation is over, then you can ascend the mountain. The blast of the shofar is going to signify, so to speak, the departure of the Shekhinah from the mountain, and then the mountain is no longer dangerous. It's not going to zap you. It's no longer electrified. What a fine coincidence, right? The ram's horn is called a Yovel. Oh, and that's the signifying end to the Sinai revelation, and the year-long shemitah, double shemitah, is also called the Yovel. So the commentaries tell us it's not a coincidence. Shemitah, that's the acceptance of Torah. That's the angelic acceptance we will do and we will listen. To be like an angel, Giborei Koach. But there was a point on the mountain where even those who accepted the Torah could not ascend. Only Moshe could ascend. When someone lays down their tools and allows their land to lie fallow for an entire year, they are effectively reliving, mimicking the acceptance of Torah at Sinai. But even then, there was a limitation, how much you could arrive at, how high up the mountain you could tread. There was a fence around the mountain. You cannot pass. You're not worthy. Moshe is worthy. You're not. Yovel, that's your ability to ascend the mountain. That double shemitah, where you're willing to say, I don't know how I'm going to survive. Oh, we'll just import it from Brazil. You can't import it from Brazil. You're relying on a miracle. Not just a miracle, a double miracle. That's like angelic cubed, squared. And that's the ability to go all the way up the mountain. For 49 days, for 49 years, the nation is preparing for revelation. The 50th, that's the revelation itself. It's not just random that shemitah was selected to teach us that all the laws were set at Sinai. There's something about shemitah itself that is so connected to Sinai. The moratorium on agricultural work, that it's more than just any representative would do. It's something that's very deeply, intimately connected to Sinai. To accept the Torah at Sinai, you needed angelic reliance on God. We will do and we will listen. To withhold from feeding your family for a whole year, you needed angelic reliance on God. Who's going to feed you? How does a farmer have such fortitude to just trust God blindly? You need to become an angel. Today we have a lot of sources of reliance. Something called social security. Now, I know that's the third rail of American politics. Social security. But what does that mean? It means that the government is going to provide security. So while I know nothing about politics, as you know, we have, in effect, a system here that's telling us you don't need to rely on God because there's social security. The government will provide for you. Now, I'm not saying the government shouldn't provide. That's not my point. My point is that our world, we see an example of something else that we can rely upon. You know what? It's nice to be part of this country and to have, this great empire, to be a citizen of this empire, to have all the rights and all the safety nets and all the welfare and all the security and the property rights and the dynamic economy. It's a good place to be. But the truth is, we're supposed to rely on God. And rely on God to the exclusion of other forces, of other entities. It's much harder to rely on God when you have so many other securities that you can fall back upon. And the Talmud tells us that before Messiah, there's going to have to come a point in time where we have nothing left to rely upon besides for God. Ein lanu al mi lehishaen. We have no one to rely upon besides for our Father in heaven. Now, don't trade upon this information. We don't know what that means. But when there is a reduction in other securities, that's when it's much easier for us to come to rely upon God. And the Mitzvah shemitah is designed to do that. Where the whole idea of food, the most basic thing that we need for ourselves, for our children, for our families, for our communities. Take a year off. Well, I'll just go to the neighbor. No, the neighbor's also taking a year off. The whole country's taking a year off. It's outrageous. What's the plan? The plan is you're going to sleep, and tomorrow there's no food, and the Almighty is going to give you manna. And you're going to sleep well, because you know that the Almighty is reliable, is not $37 trillion in debt, has no term limits, has no limits whatsoever. Shemitah is a way to simulate this 1,000% reliance on God. The nation in the wilderness, they had this all the time. Manna, it's what's for dinner and breakfast and lunch for 40 years. For 40 years, the nation was being prepared and primed to develop the attribute of total reliance on God, and they entered the land. And in our Parsha, we read, when you enter the land, and now suddenly, well, how are you feeding yourself? There's no more manna. You got to plant, you got to plow, you got to till, you got to harvest. That's a big danger, because you don't forget about this relationship that was forged over the course of 40 years. Every 7 years, it's manna season. It's manna season for another year. At Sinai, the nations of the world were offered the Torah, and they said, no, what's in it? We will listen, and then we'll consider if we'll do. Our people, our nation said the words of angels. They were eating manna, the food of angels, and they had total reliance on God completely. And the highest level of that is the Yovel. And even the people in the wilderness did not reach that level. They were barred from ascending. And God says, when the Yovel blast comes, you can ascend the mountain. What does that mean? Now, in the wilderness, you're capped. You can only reach level 49. But once you enter the land, you are able to reach level 50 with the Yovel. Because what is required of someone to do the Yovel is higher than what I'm asking you to do, to act like angels and just accept the Torah. We will do and we will listen. Torah was given to manna eaters. Torah was given to shemitah observers. The highest level, and even a higher level, are those who are observing the Yovel. Let's go back to toiling in Torah. The reason why we have to toil in Torah is because it's not easy, natural, by default, for us to connect with Torah. Torah is the mind of God. And when we're studying Torah, we're trying to change our own mind, our default setting, and acclimate our mind with the mind of God. And thus, by default, there's an inherent incompatibility between us and Torah. Torah is designed to make us like an angel. The angel said to Moshe, you don't deserve the Torah, it belongs to us. It's more naturally by us. And Moshe said, no, we could aspire to become like angels. The Yolud Isha, the person born of a woman, the flesh and blood, the Ma'enosh Tisis Terena, what is mankind that you should even consider mankind, can actually ascend and become like an angel and even greater than an angel. So yes, by default, maybe we should not have any connection, any possibility of having any overlap with Torah. That's how we start off. But we can. We can. And that journey from where we start off until we become like angels, until we pattern our mind after the mind of God, so to speak, that is the definition of toil in Torah. That's the pain. That's the dissonance. You start off life, standard issue human, and you try to say, okay, here's Torah, and there's just an incompatibility. And you find parts of Torah that they don't resonate. They're not inspiring. They're maybe even problematic. And the instinct is, well, this doesn't fit. It doesn't click. It's not for me. To toil in Torah, it's when you recognize that in every single jot and tittle of every single letter of Torah, there are piles and piles of laws. There are gems in every jot and tittle. And to recognize that, you have to rely on God 100%, 1,000%. That when He gave us this special treasure that He had hidden with Him in His treasure houses in heaven, whatever that means, for 974 generations before the world was created, that this special treasure that He used to create the world with, that is the most valuable thing in the world. and you don't recognize it because there's a lot of work that you need to do to make yourself someone who fits entirely, who's totally acclimated with Torah. And to do that, it's toil. You got to toil and toil and toil until you upgrade yourself to understanding it, to seeing the beauty in it, to seeing the richness in every single letter. The Talmud tells a story of the great sage Rava, whose name appears more often than any other name in the Talmud. And it describes how he was studying. You see like maybe some Jewish artwork of the sages studying. And it looks like they're having a good time. They're chilling. They're discussing, they're debating. There's a polemic over here. It's a didactic discussion. Talmud gives a description. It says there was a heretic who witnessed Rava studying. And he was so immersed in his studies that he didn't realize that his hand was underneath his leg, and he was squeezing his hand, and his fingers were spurtling blood. He had some wound. He didn't notice it. He was so involved. He didn't realize that he was injuring himself, and he was totally oblivious of it. That's how engrossed he was in his studies. Now, the heretic sees this and says, you guys are a bunch of fools. You are an impulsive nation. Because at Sinai you said, we will do and we will listen. And look, Rava, you are still impulsive. Now, you read that story, it's not clear what Rava's oblivion to his condition, what does that have to do with the acceptance of Torah at Sinai? The heretic is saying, oh, Rava, it's been, 2,000 years almost? A long time since the Sinai revelation, and you're still the crazy, impetuous nation who say we will do and we will listen. You haven't changed. And it's not clear immediately what Rava's intensive study has to do with the nation saying we will do and we will listen. But here's the insight. Rava is demonstrating an example of toil and Torah. He's working hard. He's engrossed. Why is he working so hard? Because there's still an incompatibility between him and Torah. And he's trying to remove any vestige of difference that separates him from Torah. The nation at Sinai, they accepted it. Sight unseen. They agreed to the terms without knowing what they were. It's like, I accept. You've seen that. It's like, oh, here's the terms and conditions. 153 pages. So today you could just put it into ChatGPT and like, okay, what was this safe to sign? But if you're like the rest of us, 99.9% of us, yes, I accept the cookies, whatever, agree. You don't know if you're signing away your life. You don't know. But you trust on the software maker. The nation trusted God, total reliance on God. And they know the Almighty will only give us gems. His credibility and his reliability are unimpeachable. And it's quite prudent to accept his gift before unwrapping it. God gives you a gift. You're going to say, let me see what's inside before I accept it. No, thank you. I'm in. I don't need any details. I'm in. We got a godly Torah. By definition, we got something we have to work really hard to make ourselves compatible with. And Rava is demonstrating that. He's toiling over his study and he's oblivious to his surroundings. He's saying he's like disengaging with his physical environment because he's so much engaged with his spiritual half, with his angelic half. That's the toil. It's very difficult. There's a struggle because the Almighty is flawless and his Torah is flawless and we are not flawless. We are flawed. We are fallible. And therefore there's an incompatibility between us and Torah. And when we study it, it's the superimposition of Torah, of God's holy Torah upon us, and the elevation and the effort to try to harmonize ourselves with it. It's to upgrade our human intellect to be more similar to godly intellect, to the level of the angels. And Rava is struggling, he's toiling, because he's upgrading himself. He's transforming himself. And when the Sadducee sees this, he says, you haven't changed. And he's right, we haven't changed. Our nation is still a nation of aspiring angels. We want a divine Torah. And if you want a divine Torah, it means that you want something which is not something you want to inspect, because you know if you would inspect it, it's not compatible. And we don't want it to be compatible because we don't want to stay the same small people that we start off as. We want a chance to upgrade ourselves and to make ourselves more godlike. We have 2 mitzvos, 2 parshios, 2 comments in Rashi. And they're both highlighting a transformation. Maybe this is really what it's all about. This goes all the way back to the Sinai. At Sinai, the nation of manna eaters said, we will do and we will listen. And the mitzvah that most exemplifies that is shemitah. And we don't have the opportunity to do shemitah. We live in the diaspora, and even those in the Holy Land. Not everyone's a farmer anymore. But it still reveals to us that there is the ultimate goal of all of it. It's to achieve a reliance on God, a dependence on God. That's something that the angels exemplify. And we could do that with the toil and Torah. I want to add one more thing. We spoke a few weeks ago, Parshas Shemini, about Moshe assembling and disassembling the tabernacle 7 times. He doesn't build it once and have it continue. He has to build it and take it apart, and build it and take it apart, and so on. 7 times he disassembled it, and only the 8th time it endured. And we suggested that this is emblematic of any effort to build a tabernacle. You're going to struggle, and you're going to fall 7 times. And we speculated that this is because we have 7 dimensions of the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara has 7 names, and every time you build something, you're actually defeating one element, but the other elements are still present. So you have to actually do it 7 times, and each time you do it, you're actually accomplishing a different dimension. You're overcoming a different obstacle of the Yetzer Hara, and the 8th time, well, that's when there are no obstacles that remain, and then it sticks. It seems to me that maybe there's another example of that over here in the shemitah. The ultimate goal is not just to have the shemitah, to accept the Torah, it's to ascend the mountain. And when the nation does the shemitah once, what happens? You do the shemitah. It's a year of total commitment to God. It's a year when the Midrash can aptly describe what we're doing as we're acting like angels. Giborei Koach, mighty ones, who do the will of God, who hearken to his voice. But what happens the year after shemitah? Go back to the drawing board. Year 8. Well, year 8, it's like year 1. You're a farmer. You got to plant. You got to till, plow, pluck out all the weeds. Where's the manna? The manna's gone. Where's the mountain? I haven't descended it. And then you do the shemitah again, year 14, and again, year 21, and year 28, 35, 49. I'm sorry, I skipped 1. 42, 49. You've done the shemitah 7 times. After you've done it 7 times, after you've arrived at the mountain with all that it entails to arrive at that mountain, to be worthy of hearing the revelation, you've done it 7 times. And every time you're back to the beginning. You are the righteous one has fallen 7 times. But after 7 times, you cease to falter. After 7 times comes the Ovel. Comes the opportunity to ascend the mountain. And only those who are brave enough to stave off 7 disappointments, only they have a chance to actually achieve the greatness that is symbolized by the Yovel. We've been like angels before, and maybe even triumphed over angels. Jacob triumphed over the angels. Moshe triumphed over the angels. We've arrived at the mountain before. We can arrive at the mountain again. And maybe, just maybe, we too can hear the blast of the shofar, have the Yovel, and ascend the mountain forevermore. Let's get to this week's dilemma, nay, the dilemma. And this is a dilemma that people face. We talked about the guy who tries it once and he sees some moderate success, but then he fails. And tries it again and sees some success, and he's back to square one. What's the attitude of someone who doesn't see the fruits of his labor? Someone who's interested in achieving great things, just can't seem to get over the hump. So, of course, we have the idea that we said earlier, you do it enough times, eventually you'll achieve some momentum, you'll hit pay dirt. But the Chafetz Chaim Blessed Memory used to say that there's a prayer that compares us to them, us who are fortunate to study Torah, to those who don't. And this is actually said at a siyum. Those who are fortunate to finish a book of Talmud make a big celebration, and there's a proclamation that is made at the end of a siyum. Anu amelim, we toil, and they toil. We toil and receive reward. They toil and do not receive reward. Those who are not studying Torah, they're working really hard. They're sweating too. They're toiling as well. But they don't get reward. We do. And the question is, wait a minute. People who work really hard, they are rewarded. Make a nice income, build a nice edifice. You work hard and you see results. So what does it mean in this prayer that we toil and are rewarded, they toil and are not rewarded? So the Chafetz Chaim used to say is that if a person works really hard and plows his field and plants and invests a lot of effort, but a tsunami comes and destroys the whole field, he toiled and received no reward. If a tailor works really hard to make a garment, but it falls apart for whatever reason, he doesn't get paid. If the Uber driver gets a flat tire and you don't use him, he worked really hard, but you don't use him. He toiled, doesn't get any reward. When it comes to Torah, if someone toils and they don't see success and they don't see the fruits of their labor and they're not able to show something tangible that they accomplished, nevertheless, we get reward, even if it's only for our efforts. It's very inspiring to know that our efforts will always yield reward. I thank you for listening to this edition of the Parsha podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe 5% of how much I enjoyed it. I appreciate your attention. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. A splendid rest of your week. I can't believe we're saying goodbye to the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, this week. It's been a wonderful journey. I guess we're on to Numbers. Parshas Bamidbar, Sefer Bamidbar, the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. Parshas Bamidbar is next. Have a sensational, uplifting, meaningful Shabbos. And please God, we will talk again next week. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.